Mr. President, I rise today to speak to commemorate the horrific death of Matthew Sheppard 20 years ago. On October the 7th, 1998, Matthew Sheppard, then a 21-year-old student at the University of Wyoming, was kidnapped, brutally beaten, and left tied to a fence in a field outside of Laramie, Wyoming. He passed away 5 days later in a hospital. Matthew was attacked because of his sexual orientation. His murder was an act of pure evil, born of hate. Since his passing, Matthew's family have worked to share his story in the hope that no other family suffers a similar tragedy. His parents, Judy and Dennis Sheppard, started the Matthew Sheppard Foundation to honor the life and aspirations of their son. Judy has made countless personal appearances around the country and around the world, sharing Matthew's story to shine a light on the importance of supporting the LGBT community and eradicating hate. She has relived the horror of his death so that others may not ever know such pain. I had the opportunity in 2005 to meet Judy Sheppard here in Washington, and I was impressed and inspired by her strength. The foundation that the Sheppard family has organized has worked to end hate in all forms around the country, starting dialogues at schools, corporations, and communities to promote human dignity for all individuals. They have also provided an online resource center for LGBT youth, helped to create a dialogue about hate crimes through support for the Laramie Project, and helped to advocate for legislation to end hate crimes. Judy Sheppard's work has been successful, and I think that's an understatement. Matthew Sheppard's story has resonated with people across the country and inspired change, including the 2009 passage of the Matthew Sheppard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which I was proud to co-sponsor. This legislation added perceived gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability as protected classes under existing federal hate crimes law. Though we've made a great deal of progress over the last 20 years, there is still so much work to do. In 2016, 6,121 hate crime incidents were reported, and of these incidents, 1,076 were based on sexual orientation bias, and 124 were based on gender identity bias. In order to stop this violence, or help to stop this violence, I'm the author of the Disarm Hate Act. This legislation would prevent those convicted of a violent misdemeanor hate crime or those who have received a hate crime sentence enhancement from buying or possessing a gun. It's critical that we work to not only address hate crimes, but to stop the culture of violence and prejudice that often begins as bullying and harassment in our schools. According to a Human Rights Campaign report, LGBT youth are more than twice as likely as non-LGBT youth to be physically attacked at school. Similarly, a report by the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network found that 4 out of 5 LGBT students reported experiencing harassment frequently in school based on their appearance or perceived sexual orientation. That's why I've consistently introduced the Safe Schools Improvement Act, which would prohibit in K through 12 schools bullying and harassment based on sexual orientation or gender identity. I'm also the co-sponsor of the Equality Act, a landmark civil rights bill that would amend existing federal civil rights laws to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in education, employment, housing, credit, and federal jury service. Matthew Sheppard's life and death has inspired great change across our nation over the last 20 years. And his life continues to inspire me and so many others, so many members of Congress, and indeed so many Americans, to continue the fight against hate and violence in all its forms. We just read today, just hours ago, a story in the Washington Post which told us that Matthew Sheppard's remains will be interred in the next couple of weeks inside the crypt at the National Cathedral here in Washington. May he rest in peace. I yield the floor.